Hi there, and welcome to Research Meets Reality, the small business edition. I'm Mike Locke from Aberdeen Strategy and Research, and today we're talking about the cloud, networking, data storage, essentially the technology backbone of a small business. We're absolutely delighted to have with us Jim Rapoza, who heads up our research coverage of IT infrastructure. Jim, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Mike, glad to be here.
Awesome. So why don't we jump right into it? As you know, we recently conducted a survey of over 300 small businesses scattered across a couple of key industries. And that research, among many, many other things, shows that one of the biggest challenges that these companies face when it comes to technology is a lack of adequate IT resources and skill sets. So let's start here, just sort of from a general perspective. How should small businesses be thinking about their staffing needs when it comes to technology and IT infrastructure?
Yeah, an interesting thing, not just in this survey, but in all our IT surveys, when we look at small businesses, is I like to call it a lack of knowledge, all the things that they don't know. So when we look at them, they're challenged by complexity, and part of that is they have a lack of expertise. They have a lack of knowledge about solutions and technologies that are available. They don't know what services and solutions are available. In a recent survey we did, 20% of small businesses they said they were completely unaware of the SMB services and solutions that were available to them. So one of the biggest barriers that small businesses run into is that, it's not just staff, it's just they don't even know what they don't know. So that can be a huge barrier, especially when you're talking about the smallest of the small. When you get into that sort of, 60 to 100 size business, they're likely to have some kind of an IT staff. There's, people who are dedicated to that task. You get into the smaller businesses, most IT is, if they're not working with a third-party service provider, it's, the company president, company founder, whoever, the business manager is the one who's dealing with IT issues. So, it's not even a staffing issue there. It's just, how do you get IT done for some of these smaller businesses?
Yeah, I think chief cook and bottle washer is the term that I'm most familiar with when it comes to that. I mean, they're basically doing everything. The founder, they're HR, they're running all the technology. So it's a thing that they struggle with. And you talk about the lack of knowledge. You put yourself in their shoes, and it's sort of how much knowledge should they have about this? So then it becomes a question of how do they focus their efforts, and how do they think about all the different technologies? And that's kind of leads into what I wanted to sort of throw out there next. When you think about the IT backbone for a small company, even one of the super small ones that you talked about, so 10 employees, 15 employees, things like that, not your 95 employee companies. There are a lot of different areas to potentially invest time and resources and funding. So things like the strength and reliability of their network, the storage infrastructure, the application environment, a lot of considerations out there when you think of the supporting technology for a business. What advice would you give a small business as they think through those needs in the areas that they might invest? Is there like a framework or a mental model that you can help them sort of leverage and try to organize their thoughts?
Yeah. Obviously, for small businesses, cloud is generally the answer. When you invest in cloud, when you invest in cloud-based technologies, you gain the sort of data center or infrastructure capabilities that are available to the biggest businesses in the world. And it often, businesses are afraid of it because they don't understand it. But when you work with partners, either a service provider or a vendor or somebody who has that skill set, they can really step these small businesses into like, well, this is what you need. This is, how you avoid over, provisioning, so you're not paying too much for cloud. This is how you can leverage new technologies, so your applications and your services are delivering what you need. You're not, if you're a small business, maybe you don't need massive scalability, but maybe, if you're a small business and you're going to be on Shark Tank next week, maybe you need to be scaling, just before your appearance or something like that. So when businesses work with the right technologies and work with the right vendors, they can really kind of overcome those gaps. When we look at our research at the technologies that small businesses and even the smallest of the small, it is cloud. It's private cloud, it's public cloud, it's hybrid cloud. Those are the top three technologies they're adopting. But the interesting thing there is they still have, especially a lot of small businesses are more likely, I think, to have a physical imprint than maybe some of the bigger businesses today that have fully gone completely remote. In smaller businesses, they often do have physical locations. So a lot of them are really interested in looking at 5G technologies and some of the other new wireless connectivity, because now you can have really high performance networking at all of your retail locations, all of your hospitality locations, all of your restaurant locations, by leveraging technologies like 5G. And we see a huge growth in small businesses being interested in 5G and investigating 5G capabilities. On top of that, there's a lot of virtualization, whether it's server virtualization, storage virtualization. Again, these are the kind of technologies that allow small businesses to build, a data center, quote unquote, without having to invest in a huge physical infrastructure expenses.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring up 5G there, because it's a lot of people hear that term and they think, okay, that's my what I need for my business is Wi-Fi. I need to have
Yeah.
Wi-Fi in the office, and it needs to be reliable so that I can do things on the internet. I can email, I can Slack, I can communicate within the office. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is that the combination of 5G plus cloud-based technology, it's about creating the connectivity between the powerful capabilities that the cloud can offer, the application environments, the storage capacity, the compute power, all of that. It's about connecting that to the workforce wherever it is, not just in a home office, but in retail outlets, or even on a mobile basis for employees that are on the go. Is that fair to say? It's sort of like you're connecting the two. 5G is sort of the conduit for small businesses to access all that power that's in the cloud.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's 100% true. I mean, I've just met with a company that is using 5G for remote workers, just kind of the way you said. So you think of the traditional way IT provisions a remote worker. You say, okay, we're going to send you a laptop, we're going to send you some stuff, or maybe a mobile device, and you set them up. But the problem you're running into now with work from home is that you have to trust their network, or you have to control their home network. And most employees aren't going to say, yeah, I'm going to give you total control over the same network that my kids are playing games on and that we're doing personal searches on. So what some businesses are doing now is they're sending you a 5G connectivity spot. And that's, so you get your computer, you get your 5G, and that's your work network, and it has nothing to do with your home network. And the same thing can happen with we're seeing the same thing happen with small businesses. So, you have a new location, a new retail outlet, a new office, a new whatnot. Instead of like sending like somebody out there to help, the regional manager put a Wi-Fi system in a box and connect to an internet provider and broadband and hope it's good enough. You just send them a pre-set up box with 5G, and instantly they have excellent high performance network connectivity. And the interesting thing there too is once you've kind of taken that step, it really opens up your business to take advantage of a lot of other technologies. So, for example, like IoT or smart devices in an office. So, if you are a retail, by having that kind of 5G, you're more easily able to take advantage of, say, augmented reality for shopping, or smart keys and smart check-in for small motels or hotels. To take advantage of all of these kind of new technologies. That all kind of comes in the door once you start taking advantage of things like 5G.
Really interesting, because these are again some technologies that a lot of people hear and they're like, oh, those are just enterprise level technologies. It's not really for me. But with the right infrastructure in place and with the right tools in place, it absolutely can be an option.
Yeah,
Which
you
is
can
sort
make the
of
argument that, sorry.
no,
I
go
was just
ahead.
going to say, you can make the argument that 5G is actually more valuable to SMBs in some ways, because it does kind of allow them to instantly take advantage of kind of networking options that you really had to build like a network core system to take advantage of as a traditional business. And also with Edge, when we talk about Edge, Now, a small business isn't probably deploying edge, but they're taking advantage of it when they're working with vendors, when they're working with system integrators, when they're working with these service providers. The way they're giving them great capabilities is through edge technology. That these providers are saying, here, we're going to take advantage of all of this kind of compute capability on your side, and it's going to give you more power, it's going to give you better security, it's going to give you more reliability.
So, really interesting point you just made. Let me sort of raise my hand in the back of the class and say, what is edge? Tell me what edge is from my like what is it? How should I be thinking about it for a small business?
So if you think of a traditional network infrastructure, it looks like sort of like a spider. If you think of like your classic corporate infrastructure, there's a main office in Chicago somewhere, or New York, or LA, Boston, whatever, and they've spent a lot of money to build this massive network infrastructure, and then everybody constantly connects back into there. That's a centralized network configuration, and to a large degree, for a long time, that's how most of the internet worked too. So if you were using, Google back in the day, or Facebook back when they came in, that was how you used those kind of capabilities. Um, Edge is sort of like the expansion of what we saw with like CDNs, content delivery networks. But basically, what you're doing is you're saying there's a lot of compute capability on the edges of the network, whether that's individual systems, whether that's devices in the cloud, devices in locations around the world, and also smart devices themselves. So if you have a smart device that's basically a computer, it doesn't have to be really, really dumb. It can handle a lot of things on its side. So a lot of things have like GPU capabilities, which can basically, do heavy duty compute capabilities. So a lot of times what you're doing with Edge is you're saying we're going to take a lot of the processing out of the core and push it to the device. It's actually the way like multiplayer games have worked for a million years. If you've ever used a multiplayer game and you're like, wow, I can't believe how well this plays with all these people connected to it. Well, it's because the sharing part of the game is just little tiny snippets of code, and all the actual compute stuff is happening on your game system. So what you're doing is kind of a similar thing. You're saying there's compute capability in offices, in cloud centers, in local towns, in the devices themselves, and it's taking advantage of all that compute capability on the edge to enable better performance, to enable new ways of building infrastructures.
Wow. Um, a lot to unpack there, and we could probably spend another hour on that alone. But I want to get to an important question for small companies, because there's a lot of exciting technology out there. Um, Most of it's not free. um, so let's talk about investment here, or in some cases potentially even lack thereof. We're talking about small businesses. We're talking about small budgets too, right? They sort of go hand in hand. About half of the companies that we surveyed reported a total annual technology budget less than $10,000. So that's a lot of sort of wearing of multiple hats and scrappy investment that happens at all of these companies that doesn't involve any kind of technology investment at all. So, are there low cost solutions, or even potentially no cost processes and best practices and procedures to put in place, where companies can really stretch their IT budget, their technology dollar, to help run their business?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, well, the first answer is everything has a cost. Even things that are totally free have a cost. That said, obviously, when you talk about the cloud today, cloud native technologies, most of the things you build the cloud with, the things you use to develop applications, they are actually free. I mean, most of the entire infrastructure of like cloud native, to be cloud native, is open source. So in a lot of cases, that does mean straight out free, especially when you talk about if you are a small business that's doing some development. That can be huge, because pretty much all the open source development tools, which are what everybody relies on nowadays, are completely free, which is a big difference than like 10, 15 years ago, when you were buying expensive IDEs and development environments that were very, very costly, especially for small businesses, and that charge per seat, charge per capability. So that's one area right away where you kind of have that opportunity to cut costs. But also is the fact that your service providers, the businesses that you're turning to help you overcome that complexity, to overcome your lack of knowledge, they are often themselves taking advantage of these open source technologies, which actually allows them to offer you better service capabilities at a lower price. That's why you have all of these um, service providers that are dedicated to working with small businesses. They're utilizing open source servers, open source cloud capabilities, open source development tools and APIs. And back in the day, if you were working with a service provider, a lot of licensing would come in with that. It's like, okay, well, we have to license this big database, and we have to license this big server, and we have to license all your this big ERP system, whatnot. And what they're coming in now is with, well, the servers are open source, and the development tools are open source, and all of this infrastructure code is open source. So from the service provider, you're basically at the end, you're mainly paying just the service provider for their maintenance and their expertise and their skill sets, as opposed to paying them and then also paying all the different licensing costs you might have incurred with non-open source tools.
Awesome. So I'm running through sort of my mental notes here. We've got open source solutions. We talked about edge computing. We talked about 5G. We talked about cloud. A lot of heady topics, but I think you've done a great job of sort of explaining to us how they become very, very, very relevant to small businesses with limited resources, with limited budgets. A lot more behind this data, a lot more research underneath the hood here that we're going to be sort of rolling out over the next few months here. But in the meantime, any other sort of final thoughts, words of wisdom for small businesses as we sort of wrap up here?
Sure. One thing we've seen in all our research is that small businesses can't really afford to do nothing. In all of our surveys, this most recent one, our surveys that happened during the quarantine phase of pandemic and over the last couple of years, have shown that small businesses that invest in IT modernization, that invest in updating and improving their capabilities, are the most successful, the most resilient, the most secure. A lot of people are afraid to adopt new technologies or modernize, but across the board, we find that when you modernize, you're improving security, and conversely, when you stick with older, out-of-date systems, you're actually increasing risk. They're more likely to have known holes, more likely to have known hacks. And when you try to integrate those with cloud technologies, with the edge, with 5G, you're often doing it with duct tape, and that also creates increased risk by itself. So definitely, I recommend all all small businesses to look into ways to modernize their technology capabilities. It often comes with a ton of benefits. In our research, we've seen that small businesses that invest in IT modernization report better security, they report better performance, they report better application control, better satisfaction from customers, they reduce complexity, they have less downtime. So across the board, IT modernization really pays off for small businesses. And that's one of the biggest recommendations I make. As a small business, you can't really afford to just stick with the old. You really need to be looking at ways to improve, to stay competitive, and to really boost all of your capabilities.
Yeah, really great points there. And it actually ties back to some of the things that Derek Brink, our analyst who covers security, he touched on as well. So the reduction of risk that comes along with, really thinking through the technology infrastructure of your organization, even as a small company, pays dividends down the road. So really, really great points. Appreciate the perspective, Jim. Thanks so much for speaking with us today. To those watching, thanks so much for joining us. Watch Aberdeen.com and our social channels for additional insights that will come out related to small businesses in the coming weeks and months. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.